The walls of my old bedroom in Lisbon still bore the faint ghosts of tape marks, rectangles where my sketches once hung, before my father tore them down, saying I should focus on real work. Now, at 28 years old, sitting cross-legged on that same bed, tablet in hand, I watched those same doodles turn the global art market upside down. Lot 47, came the smooth voice of the Christie's auctioneer, through my live stream. Early works from the Midnight Palettes collection. Opening bid, 15 million euros. My phone buzzed. It was probably another message from my mother, wondering why I wasn't at the usual Sunday lunch with the family. They still thought I was wasting my life drawing cartoons in my tiny rented attic studio. 20 million, 30 million, 45 million. On the massive auction screens, my animated art digitally enhanced versions of those teenage bedroom sketches floated like living dreams. Each piece told a layered story, rich with symbolism, satire, and social commentary. The very things my parents had once called childish fantasies. I typed a short message, "Dad, turn on RTP Channel 2. There's something you should see." 70 million from the bidder in Tokyo, the auctioneer called. I could imagine the scene downstairs. Mom ladling caldo verde into bowls, Dad ready with another lecture about getting a proper career. 80 million from the Reina Sofia Museum. The latest piece appeared on screen. A vibrant galaxy of characters and surreal landscapes, all in my signature hand-drawn style. The same style Dad had told me to abandon at 16. 90 million, 92, 95. Sold. The Midnight Palettes collection sold to the Metropolitan Museum of Art for 95 million euros. Notifications flooded my tablet, curators, journalists, collectors. But I was waiting for one thing. The sound of footsteps rushing up the stairs. Sure enough, they came. My bedroom door burst open. That was yours? Dad's voice cracked, eyes wide. Those glowing cartoon things? Animated Nutrisensus works, I corrected gently. Another notification lit my screen. The Louvre, requesting a private viewing. The same style you said would never pay the bills, I added. Mom's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering across the hardwood floor she'd once forbidden me to paint on, afraid I'd ruin it. But you live in that little attic, she stammered. You told us you were doing illustrations for children's books, Dad said finally, his voice still unsteady. That's my day job, I replied with a small smile, swiping my tablet. These are my real projects. Holographic galleries bloomed in the air above my bed, virtual projections of my exhibitions across the globe. Lisbon, Tokyo, Berlin, New York. The so-called childish sketches had evolved into an art form the world couldn't stop talking about, merging hand-drawn animation with immersive technology and layered social commentary. This was Tokyo last month, I said, showing footage of queues wrapping around the Mori Art Museum. The Paris retrospective is this spring, and next month, the permanent installation at MoMA. Dad lowered himself onto my bed, his gaze fixed on the auction livestream still running in the corner of the display. 95 million? For cartoons? For art, I corrected softly. That speaks to a generation raised on animation. Art that hides complexity behind simplicity, like those sketches you made me take down. I gestured toward the faint tape marks still on my bedroom walls, ghosts of the very work that had just sold for more than every house on our street combined. The college fund you refused to spend on art school? I brought up my bank balance with a flick of my fingers. I could buy the university now. Mom's eyes were still fixed on the spilled wine at her feet, as if seeing every time she'd scolded me for making a mess with my paints and pens. "Why didn't you tell us?" she whispered. I turned to the empty space where my first major piece had once hung, the one Dad had called a waste of paper. "Because you needed to see it like this," I said. "On the world stage, validated by the institutions you respect. If I'd told you 6 months ago that my cartoons were worth millions, you wouldn't have believed me." My tablet pinged. Another message from the Met's curator about the installation. In the auction's aftermarket, the collection's value was already climbing past 100 million euro. "All those hours you thought I was doodling?" I brought up my design software. I was redefining digital art. Dad reached for an old sketchbook still on the shelf where he'd banished it years ago. He flipped it open slowly. These drawings? They're worth millions now? The originals? I nodded. 8 figures, each probably. But I'm not selling. Why not? Because some things are worth more than money, I said, watching another museum offer flash across the screen. Like proving that the dreams you called childish could change the art world. This one, I said, enlarging a particularly intricate projection on my tablet, was inspired by the time you grounded me for drawing during math class. The piece burst into 3 dimensions, filling my childhood bedroom with swirling animated figures. Characters born from numbers and equations, each weaving stories of restriction, rebellion, and freedom. Mathematical symbols morphed into dancers, tangling and untangling in brilliant arcs of light. It sold for $12 million at Sotheby's, I added quietly. The mathematician who bought it said it helped him visualize string theory. Mom sat on my old desk chair, still shaking. But your little studio apartment we visited last month, it was so basic. I swiped my screen and brought up the security feed from that basic studio. The cramped, white-walled room they'd seen was only an anteroom, concealing a sprawling state-of-the-art digital art facility that took up the entire top floor of the building. Rows of high-powered workstations, VR rigs, motion capture systems, and half-finished projections lit up the feed. That's my actual studio, I explained. The small room is just where I meet people who still think I'm struggling. People like us, Dad murmured, his voice low as another piece in the ongoing auction's secondary market ticked past 8 figures. The apartment you kept trying to help me upgrade from? I brought up another file. A property deed. I own the building, and most of that block. Notifications kept pouring in. Galleries in Dubai, Singapore, and London requesting immediate meetings. The global art press was ablaze with my collection's record-breaking sale. But why keep it secret? Mom finally asked, her voice fragile. Why let us think you were failing? I walked to my closet and pulled out a worn leather portfolio, the one Dad once called a waste of good leather. Because of this, I said, opening it to reveal my earliest sketches. Every time you called these childish, every lecture about real jobs, every push to grow up, it all went into the art. Through my tablet's augmented reality, the simple sketches transformed into the multi-million euro works they'd become. That cartoon cat you said was a waste of time, it rose from the page into a layered animated commentary on societal expectations, sold for $20 million. Those silly doodles in my math notebook? They spun into an immersive installation owned by a tech billionaire. Dad held up an old permission slip, one he'd refused to sign for an art camp. His voice broke. All this time, while we pushed you to be practical, I was building something revolutionary, I finished. Something proving art doesn't have to follow rules to be priceless. My tablet pinged again. My AI assistant's voice chimed through. Is Almeida. The Vatican Museum's curator is on the line. They're commissioning a permanent installation. If you want to see what happened when the Vatican called, and how my art changed history, make sure you subscribe now so you don't miss the next chapter. Mom's hands flew to her mouth. The Vatican? I glanced at my tablet, along with the Guggenheim, the Tate Modern, and, apparently, the Imperial House of Japan. Dad lowered himself onto my old beanbag chair, the one he'd once tried to throw away because it wasn't professional enough for a young adult's room. The commission fees, I continued, bringing up the incoming offers, start at $50 million each, though the Vatican's offering something more interesting than money. What could be more interesting than 50 million euros? Dad asked, half skeptical, half curious. I expanded the Vatican's proposal into a full holographic projection. The glowing text floated between us. Reimagine the Sistine Chapel ceiling for the digital age. A permanent fusion of Michelangelo's masterpiece with my so-called childish cartoons. The room lit up with my preliminary concepts, animated angels weaving through frescoes, Renaissance saints and prophets subtly shifting as viewers moved beneath them, each scene layered with interactive symbolism. Those late nights you thought I was wasting in front of my computer? I gestured toward a swirling sequence of light and form. I was building the technology to make this possible. While you worried about my career, I was inventing new ways to see art. Another chime, this time from the Met's installation team, requesting technical specifications. On my display, I could see workers preparing an entire wing for my collection. Mom broke the silence. Your cousin Stephen's law firm, the one you refused to interview with, they just bought 3 pieces for their lobby. I nodded. 28 million euros for works they think came from an anonymous artist, the same style they laughed at when it filled my high school notebooks. I swiped again, revealing the final surprise. Next month's gallery opening, the one you assumed was another hobby project? Dad's brow furrowed. What about it? It's not just a gallery, I said, activating the architectural plans. I bought the art school that rejected me and transformed it into a digital art museum and education center. The holographic rendering rose before us. 30 floors of immersive exhibition halls, innovation labs, and classrooms designed to teach the techniques my parents once discouraged. The same school that said my work was too unconventional, I added, will now have an entire curriculum based on it. The final slide showed the gala guest list, a waiting list of collectors, critics, and celebrities willing to pay €1 million per ticket. I smiled softly. Your seats are front row, free of charge. Mom's eyes shimmered with tears. Oh, honey, we were so wrong. You weren't wrong, I said gently, watching another piece flash across my tablet screen. Sold for 8 figures. You were just looking at art through an old lens, the same way traditional galleries did, until my so-called cartoons started outselling their classical collections. The Lisbon sunset streamed through my bedroom window, its warm light breaking into fractured shapes that danced across the holographic projections of my work. On my display, Christie's auctioneer was calling the final lots. Even my smallest pieces were now going for sums that made the earlier millions look modest. There's something else you should see, I said, tapping a hidden command. The room dissolved into a virtual gallery, walls alive with the story of my career. This is what I was building while you thought I was struggling, I continued. One wall showed the rejection letters from galleries that called my style too juvenile. Another displayed my first crude digital experiments. The next, headlines from the moment the art world realized animation could carry deeper meaning than oil on canvas. The summer internship I turned down at the bank, I pulled up a swirling vortex of animated figures, mathematical symbols colliding and reforming into new worlds. I was in Tokyo, creating this. It sold for €30 million, 0 cents, to a banking consortium that now uses it to train their AI on economic pattern recognition. And that Christmas dinner I missed? A new scene bloomed before them. My installation at the Louvre, a living mural that shifts with the seasons. Mom sank deeper into her chair, eyes wide, taking in each piece. Every work worth more than their entire life savings, every venue more prestigious than the last. But your apartment, Dad began. It's actually the top 3 floors of the building, I said, bringing up blueprints. The small studio you saw? That's just for visitors who need to believe I'm still a struggling artist. Keeps negotiations interesting. My phone buzzed again. Miss Almeida, my AI assistant's voice announced, final numbers from today's auction are in. With secondary sales and commissions, your total valuation has surpassed €1 billion. The room fell silent except for the faint hum-hum of the projectors. "1 billion, Mom whispered. That's just today's market value, I explained, bringing up the projections. The futures market expects it to triple within a year. Dad stood, staring at the wall where he'd once pinned a poster of respectable career choices over my sketches. All those times we said you were wasting your talent, his voice broke. We were the ones who couldn't see. I tapped my tablet, bringing up a piece I'd never shown in public. It wasn't for galleries or collectors or critics. It was a fully immersive digital recreation of my childhood bedroom. Every sketch, every scrap of paper, every taped-up doodle exactly as they had been before my parents made me take them down. "This one's not for sale," I said softly. "Some art needs to stay personal." The room glowed with animated memories. Younger versions of me sat cross-legged on the floor, pencil in hand, lost in drawings long after midnight. The shadows on the walls shifted as those cartoons came to life. Dreams in motion, surviving every frown, every lecture, every dismissal. "The gallery opening next month," I continued, "isn't just about showing my work. It's about changing how we define value. Every kid who's been told their dreams are childish will have a place to learn, create, and prove the critics wrong." A new alert flashed across my tablet. The final piece of my plan was ready. "This old art school I bought?" I brought up the live construction feed. "It's not just becoming a gallery. It's the world's first digital arts academy." The holographic blueprint rose before us. Studios, animation labs, VR theaters, and classrooms designed for innovation. Full scholarships, I added, for students whose families think their art is just cartoons. Mom's tears slipped freely now as she watched the plans unfold. A massive state-of-the-art complex dedicated to nurturing the kind of creativity they once tried to discourage in me. "And the first exhibition," I said with a smile, "will be called Childish Dreams. It'll showcase my earliest sketches right beside the multi-million euro works they became. Every insult, every rejection, transformed into proof that unconventional art can be priceless." Dad reached out and pressed his palm against one of the faint tape marks still on my wall, the ghost of a drawing that had once hung there. "We were so wrong," he whispered. "No," I said gently as another notification came through. Another 8-figure sale. "You were just looking at art through an old frame. Sometimes the most valuable masterpieces start as sketches in a child's bedroom." Outside, I could hear the rising hum of voices. Reporters gathering at the gate, desperate to photograph the mysterious artist who had just shattered every pricing record in modern history. But I didn't rush to meet them. For now I let them wait. I've spent years hearing the same words. "It's just a phase. It won't pay the bills. You need to be realistic." I know many of you have heard them too, whether about your art, your ideas, your passions, or your dreams. That's why I'm asking you, not just as a viewer, but as someone who understands, to be part of this journey. If my story has stirred something in you, I'd love for you to share your thoughts below. Tell me, have you ever had a dream dismissed as childish or impractical? How did you handle it? Your comments aren't just words on a screen. They're reminders to others that they are not alone in their fight to be seen and valued. I read every single one, and I promise, your story matters here. And if you believe in this message, if you believe that art, creativity, and passion deserve a place in this world, please subscribe to this channel. Every subscription, every like, every share helps me take these stories to more people who need to hear them. It means more than you realize, because behind every video is someone out there who might finally feel understood. Here's the truth I've learned. The people who tell you to be realistic are often speaking from their own fears, not your limits. The world has enough conformity. It needs your colors, your quirks, your voice. Never shrink yourself to fit into someone else's frame. Keep creating, keep building, keep dreaming, even if your dreams don't look like anyone else's, especially if they don't. And when the day comes that the world finally sees your worth, remember this: you were enough all along.